Welcome to another episode of Paranormal People, brought to you by Angry Fox Media. I hope it's not late where you are, because this episode is going to give you a sleepless night. In this episode, we speak to Velez from the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support, a not-profit organization in the US that helps people with experiences in the paranormal, including alien abductions, cryptids, demons, anything you can think of. And we really do have it all in this episode. So buckle in and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to Paranormal People. My name is Alex and I'm your host. Today we have Les Velez from the OPUS network. Les Velez is a University of Vermont graduate with a degree in business administration, a US Army veteran and former vice president of Luscombe Engineering. He joined MUFON in 1991. Les has served in various roles and now works as a research consultant for MUFON's Experiencer Resource Team. In 1994, he co-founded OPUS, the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support. Hi, Les. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. Look forward to working with you today. OPUS stands for the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support. And as you mentioned in the introduction, we were founded in 1994, and we are officially a nonprofit recognized by the U.S. IRS. So any donations that come our way are tax deductible here in the U.S. But the way we came about was very interesting, and it all got started, I guess I have to go back many, many moons, as they say, when I was 11 years old living in Connecticut. And I saw this object. This was early evening in October, and I was coming back in the house, and I noticed off to my right this object, totally silent, oval in shape, just emanating this like self-illumination type of appearance. And it just slowly started to move away. No sound. And I, being 11 years old, I was really dumbfounded and scared. And I ran in a house and tried to get my father to come out. And by the time I convinced him to come out, it was gone. And he says, "Oh, it's probably just a beacon of light reflecting off a cloud." And of course, I didn't buy that. And shortly thereafter, I went to the library and started picking up books on UFOs. And that I really got quite interested in the whole topic. And I was very much a nuts and bolts kind of a guy. I was always interested in trying to understand how these things operated. And so I got a little bit older and it started to fade for me. I guess, I finally went off to college and got into the military, eventually got married and settled down in Connecticut. And had this opportunity to get involved with a company out on the West Coast in California, and moved out there and picked up the Mercury News, the San Jose Mercury News, as it was called back then. And I saw this article about this nuclear physicist by the name of Stanton Friedman that was coming to San Jose City College to talk about UFOs and the government cover-up. Well, let me tell you, I got so excited. I said, "Oh my goodness, I have to go see this guy." So like somebody threw a switch. Okay, now this whole thing bubbled up again inside me that, oh my goodness, I want to find out more, try to understand it more, and went to his presentation, which was phenomenal. And on my way out, there was a table set up by an organization called MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, which was established in 1969 here in Texas. And so I decided, okay, how do I get more involved with this organization? Well, they have a monthly journal that they publish talking about the cases that they are involved in. And so I said, okay, I got to read about these cases. So I got the journal. And then after a while, this was not enough. And I found out that they had a training course for field investigators. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to take this course. And I did. And I passed the test. I became a field investigator, and I started going out with a more experienced field investigator. And the cases that we got involved with were just not only people telling us that they had a sighting, but that they also had contact with these non-human intelligences. And I remember the first case, and I was very skeptical. As I said, I was a nuts and bolts kind of a guy. And so, I kind of said, well, okay, maybe something else is going on here, but, they did have a sighting. So that was good for me. And, but then we got another case and then another case. And these people were all saying the same thing, that they saw this object, but then they subsequently had contact with something, this non-human intelligence of some kind. Well, at that point, I decided that, well, there must be something going on here. One of the people said to me one day that, do you know of other people having experiences like this? And I said, yes, I do. And the next thing I know, I'm facilitating a support group in my office in San Jose, California. Well, that's when things really got interesting, because these people came together and they were telling their stories, asking their questions, and telling incredible stories about their experiences. And so one day I got a call from the head of MUFON, the international director, and saying that a reporter wanted to speak to me. He was a local reporter, and he wanted to speak to someone that's involved with these types of cases. And so the international director gave him my contact information. And so we had this wonderful afternoon of taking pictures and asking questions and everything. And the article was written up in the Monterey Coast Weekly paper. And I subsequently got a call from a woman down in Carmel. And she had read the article and was interested in what we were doing and wanted to understand what was happening to her brain waves when she was in contact with these entities that she's in contact with. Well, that was like the beginning of a very interesting scenario that went down. When I heard that, I said, well, I don't know how to possibly to see what's going on with her brainwaves when this is happening. But then she said she was working with an emergency room doctor down in Carmel. So that piqued my interest, because I had a doctor friend that was very interested in meeting other doctors that were involved with the phenomena. So I called him up and I said, Gene, his name is Dr. Gene Lipson. And I said, Gene, let's go down there and see this woman, and we can meet this doctor, and let's see what's going on. We'll see where this leads us. So we did. And it was a Saturday afternoon. We went down there. And as we walked into her home, there was a picture on the wall. And she's standing on the back of this rather large vessel in these beautiful crystal clear blue waters. And I'm saying, so what's this picture about? She says, oh, I was down in the Caribbean helping these treasure hunters. I said, really? Well, that's fascinating. I said, how are you doing that? She says, well, I was in contact with the captain of the galleon that had gone down. Well, that was the beginning of an incredible afternoon, because what we found out was that after a near-death experience that she had, she became very psychic and started to open up to all these entities that she was able to be in contact with. So the rest of the afternoon, she was telling us things about ourselves that there was no possible way. We didn't know her from Adam. I mean, the bottom line is, how could she possibly know those types of things about us? So we came away from that afternoon saying, how can we possibly help people like this? This is really fascinating. And there's more to be learned by working with these people. And so that's when OPUS was hatched, so to speak. And then, like I said earlier, in 1994, we became a nonprofit organization. And our mission basically is to help people having paranormal experiences. And of course, the paranormal covers a lot of ground. I mean, whether you're talking poltergeist activity, spiritual awakening, Kundalini awakening, UFO contact, contact with non-human intelligences. And so we finally put together a framework of what we wanted to do. And we do basically offer people now, today, 3 different things when people are looking for support. Number one is we have a confidential online support group where we have now today almost 400 people from around the world. And of course, this phenomena is worldwide. It's not just relegated to the US or the UK. It's all over the place that this is going on. And so this has probably turned out to be one of the most beneficial things for people that are looking to be able to talk to other people that are having similar experiences. Because oftentimes these people cannot talk to even their family members, their spouse. They can't talk to their fellow workers. They can't talk to clergy because a lot of times they get ridiculed and people think, well, they must be crazy. A lot of people that have come to us have also gone to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and found out that they don't have a psychopathology, that they're not crazy. So then what is going on? Where do they turn? What could they do with this thing that's happening to them? And so they're isolated. They're very isolated. And that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing because oftentimes it causes severe issues. I mean, whether it's drug abuse, alcoholism, their lives get turned upside down. They can't work. I mean, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. So they need to understand, number one, that they don't have a psychopathology in 99% of the cases, that there is other people out there that are having similar experiences and that they can talk to these people. And so it's really, I think, probably been the most beneficial thing that we've developed. And then the other thing we do, the second thing that we do is that we have a referral network of mental health practitioners and hypnotherapists that if that is something that these people are looking for, then we can point them in the right direction. And then the third thing is the fact that we have established a group called the EST, our Experiencer Support Team. And these are people that have had a lot of experience dealing with people. And so they do triage. When these people come into us and talk to them, find out, what it is that they're looking for and how we can best help them. And so that's working very well. And so we're trying to, do more outreach. We just recently updated our website, so it's much easier to navigate and I think is more helpful. We have a lot of documentation and articles on there. We've done research. We're in the process of doing a study right now. But going back in time, we did a study with MUFON in the 2007-2008 timeframe called the Omega-3 study, where we took 71 people that claimed that they had contact with these non-human intelligences, and then 51 people as a control group. And what we found out through various psychological testing instruments, that these people did not have a psychopathology. They were not crazy. And that went for both groups. That they were not fantasy prone, which a lot of debunkers talk about the fact that, well, these people are just making a lot of this stuff up. They were not. After these experiences, their worldview changed significantly to the good, where the message that they seemed to pick up during these meetings was the fact that we need to be better stewards of the planet. We need to be better to one another. We need to be more loving. These are all wonderful, wonderful things. And if the whole world felt that way, maybe we wouldn't have all these wars. And we could focus on more important things.
It is interesting you mentioned that, because that's something I've noticed actually from a lot of experiences, is that it's often a message of love and something that's not overly malicious. And that is quite interesting, really, isn't it?
It is. It's very interesting. And, like here on this planet, okay, we have good people and we have bad people, unfortunately. And I think the same thing is going on out there, that there are forces of good and there's forces of evil. And so these experiences that people are having, certainly in the beginning stages, the ontological shock that happens when all of a sudden you're pulled out of your bed and pulled through a window that's closed or through the ceiling or through the walls, and you're put on a table and you're probed and all of this. I mean, that will definitely be traumatizing to a great degree. However, over time, a lot of these people become to accept this phenomena, are more comfortable with it for whatever reason. And then in the later stages, when it stops, it's almost like the Stockholm syndrome, where they're saying, okay, how come they're not interested in talking to me anymore or coming for me? And so it's really interesting. You hear about these really horrific cases, and the beginning stages, and most of the time are, but then over time, they seem to get to a better place. But it's a mixed bag, so, I don't want to put out there that they're all good or they're all bad. I think it's a combination. These entities can be both, even within species. I mean, they talk about the grays, they talk about the reptilians, they talk about the mantis type, they talk about the Nordic type, which seems to be like the main groups. So what's their agenda?
And have you seen any patterns from looking at the different species you mentioned, like the reptilians, the greys? Is there any correlation between the different types of phenomenon or the different types of creature that people are experiencing and whether they're malevolent or friendly?
Right. Well, let's take the reptilians, because typically, in a lot of cases, the reptilians are given a bad name. Okay, that they're pretty mean, they're pretty nasty, they're highly sexed. There's all kinds of things that may be considered very negative. However, I've also had cases where these reptilians have been very kind, very nice, very open to working with people in a positive way. And again, what it shows is that you have, even within species, if you will, if we want to call it that, good ones and not so good ones. And so when you go down the scale of how these entities are thought of, the grays are typically thought of as not being very good. Okay, because they do the dirty work. They come and get you. They put you up on a table, and then you have either the tall gray. The grays are like two types. They've got short ones and you got tall ones. And so the short ones are doing all the dirty work. The tall one may be observing or somehow facilitating the experiment. And then you have the praying mantis type, which seems to be like the main one that is supervising what's going on. And then of course, you don't hear a whole lot about the Nordics, as far as being negative or positive. They almost seem to be like a neutral group. They're just kind of observing things. And then, of course, you have many cases where people talk about our military personnel being on board craft. That comes up quite frequently. So, of course, there's been discussion on many occasions by people of credible repute that, yes, we do have agreements with these entities, and we have been working with them, and there's bases on the moon, so.
Do you think there's much credibility to that in terms of there being bases on the moon and military on these craft?
Well, you have to go with what these people are saying that have the kind of background that would put them in a position to understand that this is true. Like this retired Israeli general, Haim Eshed, who put out a book, I think now a couple of years ago, that claimed that, yes, we have agreements with these aliens, that there are bases on the moon and Mars, and that we have been working with them. And then the question came up, well, why don't these entities show themselves and make it more obvious that this is going on? And the word that came back was the fact that we're not ready. We are not ready to have that happen. So whether or not you believe that. And then, of course, recently, Dave Grush, who was the member of the NRO, basically putting out information at the congressional hearings about the fact that we do have crashed UFOs, we do have alien bodies, and there are people that know this. And so there's a reason why these congressional hearings are going on, because there's obviously enough information that people in the right places do now know about, and therefore are trying to understand, what the heck is it that we truly know? What do we truly understand? And I had the opportunity right before COVID shut everything down a couple of years ago. I had the opportunity to have lunch with Lou Elizondo, and he was there to do an interview with an experiencer, which was going to be on that show Unidentified that ran about a year ago or so on the History Channel here in the U.S. And that particular episode never got aired, because I think what had happened there was they were trying to focus on nuts and bolts and not on the experiencer type situation, which is the next thing that's got to happen, because these people are having phenomenal experiences. Something is going on for sure. I mean, there is evidence. Debunkers say, well, there's no evidence. Well, what about these implants? And that is physical evidence. I mean, the fact that some of these things transmit, okay, that they're made up of non-earthly isotopic ratios. I mean, there's so much that can be looked at if people have open minds.
Of course.
And I think that's what's starting to happen. More and more scientists now are starting to come to the realization that there is something that we can really look at and try to better understand. Of course, the big question is whether or not we'll ever be able to fully understand it. It just may be a reality that we can't grasp in this lifetime.
It could be too far out of our understanding, couldn't it, potentially? Yeah. And in terms of that evidence, and that's something I'm really interested in, I think, the more evidence we have, the more we can open people's minds to these kinds of experiences. And have you actually seen any evidence of those implants?
Well, as a matter of fact, I met the late Dr. Roger Lear, who wrote a book, Alien and the Scalpel, where he analyzed 17 of these implants and had them analyzed by prestigious labs. And they found all this amazing properties of these things. And some of these things, when they went after them, actually moved. They would move. But physically in my hands, I have seen some of these implants.
Wow.
And this is years and years ago. There's another gentleman by the name of Daryl Sims here in the United States, actually here in Houston, Texas, that has quite a collection of implants that he's garnered over the years. And he's of the camp that all these entities are evil and, should be eradicated. And then, of course, you've got other people on the other side that they're all positive and wonderful. And
yes, there's always going to be two camps, aren't there? It's like with anything, I suppose, with the wars and things as well. There's always a good side and a bad side, isn't there? And with these implants, it'd be interesting to know, I suppose, where the implants usually are on the person. And do you know what they're used for? What's the purpose?
Well, based on the fact that these things, first of all, generally they can be anywhere, in the legs, in the nasal cavity, in cheeks, and behind the ear. Whitley Strieber has an implant behind his ear. And so, like I say, they can be anywhere in the body. And there's been many, many x-rays of these things that have been taken, and they're very unusual. Some of them look like little corkscrews, and others are delta in shape. They come in all shapes and sizes, basically. But they all exhibit, a lot of commonalities as far as what their makeup is.
And when you say they move, what do you mean by that?
Well, when they actually went in to excise the implant itself actually physically moved within the person's body, tried to get away, if you will.
And do you think that could be like to bury the evidence almost?
Your guess is as good as mine on that. I really, truly don't understand the mechanism of something like that happening.
No.
But they also, so is it a tracking device? I've heard that it monitors pollution levels in us, besides being a tracking device. If the person moves somewhere but then the experiences continue to happen, how does that happen? They have that capability of tracking people with those devices in them? Or is it doing something totally different? As I said, monitoring pollution levels in our bodies, which again goes back to these comments that are made about the fact that our DNA, our genome has been manipulated thousands and thousands of years ago to facilitate us being who we are now. Dr. Gary Nolan from Stanford University has posited an interesting theory that, geologists talk about the Earth being 4.5 billion years old. And he says, and the human genome mutates about every 600,000 years. Well, in order for us to be where we are right now, okay, with the mental capacity that we have and everything, that the planet should be 9 billion years old. Okay. But if that's not the case, and it is 4.5 million, then somebody messed with our genome way back when. And that's why you have people, when they ask the question, why me? They're probably following an experiment. They're following generations of people. And you'll find that a person that comes to us, you talk to them and you find out, well, not only they have had experiences, but their parents or their grandparents. And they're following generations of people. And there are millions and millions of people that have had experiences. Back in '92, the Roper organization, funded by Robert Bigelow and David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins, they came up with like 6 million people in the United States alone have had an experience. 6 million.
Huge, isn't it?
Fast forward in time, how many more people? And this is a worldwide phenomenon. And my latest theory on this is the fact that everybody, including you and I, have had an experience, whether we consciously recollect it. And I'll tell you why I feel that way. Oh, this is years ago when I had the support group in San Jose. This person said to me, "I've seen you before." "Oh, really? Where, at a UFO conference?" No. I saw you on board the craft." "Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting." And I kind of blew it off.
Not something you hear every day.
It was, no, you don't. And it was like a year and a half, 2 years later, totally different person in the support group said the same thing. "I've seen you before." And I said, "Where are you?" No. "You were sitting on this bench naked on board the craft and you were freaking out and they told me to go over to you to calm you down." Okay. So at that point, I decided, all right, I'm going to go get regressed. I'm going to try to dig in and see if I can see anything or find out anything along those lines. Well, I did not find out anything along those lines, but I had multiple past lives. I found out multiple past lives over centuries. And the one thing that has also come up, and it's in my book, The Unknown Other and the Existential Proposition of Alien Contact, is that aliens talk about reincarnation, that it's a process of the universe. That's how the universe operates. And so that to me was very fascinating. And so after a little bit of time, after this last person told me that, and I went and got regressed, I had another conversation with another person and I told them the story and they said, well, maybe this person somehow tapped into a past life that you had where you were actually taken and brought on board a craft, which I never went back to dig into, which maybe someday I will, but I'm perfectly comfortable right now just not understanding what happened if it did.
Some things are better left unexplained, aren't they, at times?
Exactly.
And do you think there could be any correlation between the experience you had when you were 11 and this coming to light? I mean, did you have any lost time when you saw the UFO when you were younger? Or could that have maybe been the time where you were on board a craft?
Right. That's a good question. I don't recollect any time that I may have had that were missing. I don't think so. But then again, they can manipulate time. And it's, come up time and time again where people are brought back before they're taken or vice versa. I mean, they seem to be able to manipulate time and space. So if I was taken, it didn't seem that way, but it's possible. It's totally possible because you hear it time and time again where people have missing time.
You do. Yeah. It's a really common thing, isn't it, with abduction cases?
It is. One of the stories, one of the first stories in the book, I talk about this couple. They were amateur pilots, and they were picnicking in a park north of Santa Cruz, and they were coming out, and it was getting to be dusk, and it's a rather hilly. It's just right above the ocean, goes uphill from there, and they were coming down. They see this light over the ocean, and it caught their attention, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger until this light was over their head, but it was a triangular craft about the size of a small Learjet, and was no sound, no nothing, and they just observed it, and it went into this canyon behind where they were, and they noticed another light over the ocean, and the same thing happened. It came in, and then it got right above their heads, and again, a triangular craft, about the same size. The first one, they felt they were looking at it. The second one, they felt it was looking at them, and they became frightened. And so they decided, okay, they were going to get out of there. So they started to walk out of there, but they felt like they were floating,
like just levitating above the ground.
Almost the feeling of levitation.
Yeah.
And this path where they had to go down, and I went there with them to check this out. It's hard to get down through there even during daylight time. And this was already dusk. It gets very dark. There's a lot of vegetation. It's rocky, but they seem to navigate down through there very easily. And they got down to their car, and that's the last thing they remember until 3 hours later. They find themselves in a restaurant not far from there, maybe only about 10 minutes away from where they were. They had no idea how they got there. They're just sitting in this restaurant. And so they subsequently came to one of the support group meetings.
That's really interesting as well, that it's a shared experience, because I don't know whether it's rare for you, but certainly from my research, it seems to be quite rare that multiple people will experience the same thing. And you do, of course, you see stories about multiple people observing a craft or observing a crash or something like that, but actually experiencing something like a levitation or an abduction or lost time together, I would think would be quite a rare thing.
Well, it is. It's a rare thing for sure that you have multiple people being involved with an abduction. And so, as I said, they came to our meeting, and they had taken a picture of this rash that they had both developed shortly thereafter that experience. And they went to the doctor, and the first doctor said, well, it's not poison ivy or poison oak or anything like that, but I don't know what it is. And so I think they went to his doctor first, then they went to her doctor, and he says, well, I don't know what this is. It may be something, is a reaction to something you ate, or who knows. He didn't have an answer for it. So they took a picture of this rash with a lot of small, tiny bumps, and they showed it around to the group. And almost without exception, they all said they had that same kind of thing shortly after one of their experiences. And so one of the people in the group said, well, I think I know what that's from. And we said, okay, what is it from? He says, well, it's a reaction to the fluid that they dip you in to sanitize you when they bring you on board the craft.
Terrifying.
So now this happened over 30 years ago, this particular case. I recently got a phone call from them, probably about 3 months ago, and they have not been regressed. They have not had any regression. There was a time when they thought they would want to do it, but then they decided not to do it. But consciously, the woman said now she remembered this came up, that she was dipped in some kind of fluid on board the craft.
And did she explain what the fluid was like?
Well, it was very viscous, so it wasn't a jelly or anything like that, but it was just a fluid. And beyond that, she had no further explanation.
And could she recall any pain as well when that happened?
No, there was no pain.
That's interesting, isn't it? So it's just some kind of reaction due to it being a completely foreign substance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, these are the kind of things that come up that just boggles the mind.
Completely. And you've obviously had a lot of different cases, and there are, of course, the UFO cases that you have, and the alien cases, the abduction cases. Do you also have cases related to maybe interdimensional beings, or what people might refer to as spirits, that sort of thing?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And they go hand in glove a lot of times, where you'll have a typical gray come into the bedroom, but then you have a shadow person, or you have an energy entity that's involved. So it's on multiple levels, especially when people start having these kind of things. They're not just usually one thing. It can be multiple things, whether it's orbs. There's been many cases where an orb has entered a person's body and cured them of something, or an orb went into somebody's body and they developed autoimmune issues afterwards. It's a mixed bag. I was coming back from a symposium, MUFON symposium meeting. This is years and years ago. And I was sitting next to this woman who turned out to be the head of St. Jude Hospital here in the United States. And she was asking me, what was I, you're going home, small chit chat and thing. Come to find out, I'd been at this UFO thing, and she got very interested. And I said, have you had any kind of things go on that has been unusual? She says, well, Yeah, I was at this other hospital years ago, and this woman had cancer, and they were going to operate her on her. And the morning of the operation, they came in to get her, and she told the doctors, I don't need the operation anymore. And they said, what do you mean? And she says, well, they came last night and they took care of it. And and so they thought she was just flipping out, losing it before the operation. But they listened to her and they decided, okay, we're going to double check. Okay, if she's so sure. And so they did an x-ray, and sure enough, the cancer was gone.
Wow.
It was gone. And she told this story about these entities coming to her that night and doing something to her. And this is happening. People also have been abducted, and they come back with the ability to heal people. and they've also been healed by these entities, of course. And it's mind-boggling how this reality is so different and so impactful that it just messes with your mind, as how is that possible?
And I guess these experiences can be put across in a number of ways by people. I suppose a lot of people, when it comes to especially things like healing, maybe they would affiliate that with a religion or, maybe something religious or due to their religious beliefs. But actually what they might think to be a divine miracle could actually be an interdimensional being or something completely different.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There, the main types that one of the research projects that we did, we went out to therapists and asked them, what are people dealing with? What is 1 through 4? Okay, give us your top down. The grays were number 1, orbs were number 2, interdimensional beings was number 3, and poltergeist was number 4.
And with poltergeist, it's quite interesting because I recently had an interview with a lady called Jennifer in Australia. And she experienced a lot of different poltergeist activity growing up. And when I was speaking to her, it sounded just so, it was like she'd lived it yesterday, but this was when she was a child and while she was a teenager. And it was the kind of the typical poltergeist things that you'd hear with clocks flying off the walls, lots of banging around the house. And I found that really interesting. And I guess it would be interesting to hear your take on poltergeists and what they could be. Do you think that they are just energy that's gone rampant? From your research and your experience, what do you think it could be?
Well, I had a woman that I interviewed because I also do interviews. You can see the interviews on our website, opusnetwork.org, or on YouTube. Her name is Paula Nance, and she does a lot of investigations related to poltergeist activity. And what's interesting is that there seems to be a connection that can be made when she was involved with a case where it was down south in the Carolinas in the U.S. here at this plantation. And she had this EVP, electronic voice type instrumentation where she could actually pick up voices and things. And she was hearing gunshots through this device. She was hearing all kinds of things. And then these entities, these poltergeists, okay, were actually observing her. And so it was a time probably during the Civil War, our Civil War. And these entities were observing her, and they told her that she looked like she was dead. and so I mean, it was a fascinating interview that I did, and those kind of revelations where she was actually communicating back through this time glitch somehow, and they were saying that she looked like she was dead. And oh my goodness! So what are these? What are these things? It's our soul, that soul energy, and that never dies. That just never dies. We get reincarnated, and these are souls that somehow get lost, if you will, or get sucked into being where they are for whatever reason. We certainly don't understand it, but it could be multiple things. And of course, we have demonic things that are going on as well. I've been involved with some cases where people have had not only a ghost, but a demon in their house. And the demon causing all kinds of, scratches on the body and all this kind of thing. And in this one particular case, there was a young boy that somehow had died. And they finally were able to send him on his way through various, mediums that came out to the house and dealt with that. But the demon you couldn't get rid of this demon very easily. And finally, the woman that had the house sold it. And then shortly thereafter, the people that bought it got out of there as well, because this demon was continuing to raise havoc. And what they found was that there was a ley line that ran under the house. The investigations that had taken place, and that this ley line ran up through the neighborhood, through underneath a couple of other houses, and those people were having problems.
The demonic side of things is always a bit of a strange one for people, isn't it? And I guess it's difficult to know whether the demon is haunting the house, the person, what's the purpose for being there, why are they causing this chaos? Have you ever really gotten to the bottom of that?
Well, a lot of times what we do is we turn these types of cases over to experts in the field. Okay. In some cases, we need to, get an exorcist to come in and do something, or a medium to talk to the ghost and say, okay, why are you still here? What's going on here? Here's what we need to do to get you in a better place. There are people that have those kind of backgrounds, that really work, on a regular basis. And so we don't have all the expertise in house by any means. We also are affiliated with other organizations, like the Spiritual Emergence Network. And there's so many other organizations that are doing fine work out there, whether it's, investigating Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or poltergeist activity, or demonic type situations. Matter of fact, Denise has had some cases where she was involved with dealing with demonic situations.
So in terms of, you've experienced all sorts of things here, from UFO phenomena to aliens to demons to poltergeists. And I guess all of these very, very difficult to explain. And therefore, when we mentioned about people having to open their minds a little bit to these things, how do you feel that the perception of paranormal experiences in general has changed over the years? And what role has Opus played in that?
Well, I think certainly, our social media and the programming on television has certainly done a lot. And people like yourself having podcasts like this, opening up the public to information that is very different, out of the norm, if you will. And so I think our technology now is such that information is instantaneous. You don't have to look too far. You can Google it, and you get information that is incredible. We've never had this kind of capability. So the awareness that is been brought forward by shows like yours is very pivotal. And then, you got the History Channel with the ancient aliens, and The Proof is Out There, and so many other shows on the Discovery Channel where they're talking about all kinds of subjects related to the paranormal. The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, and all those things that are going on at that ranch are just totally bizarre.
I was looking into that recently, actually, the Skinwalker Ranch, and that's a really creepy one, and there's so much about it. Have you had anybody come to Opus directly about that at all?
Not directly, but I mean, the situations are such that people have had. Matter of fact, I personally saw a cattle mutilation that occurred in New Mexico. I was with my son-in-law, and we were out camping, and we were in this open area, and we came across this cow that it was obvious that it had all the classic parts removed: eyeballs, the side of the cheek, the tongue, the rectum cored out, and its horns. You could tell this thing was dropped on its head. Horns were twisted, not broken, but just twisted. So there's, people talk about the fact, well, that's our military doing that kind of thing. But, anything is possible, but I don't know. I don't think our military is doing this kind of thing.
It begs the question of why, doesn't it? And also, you'd normally expect a military thing like that to be done in much more secretive, secretive location.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right. There's no way that the military would be so open. They could bring them into a closed facility and do whatever they need to do, and get rid of the body.
Exactly, and we've seen so many different military cover-ups, haven't we? I mean, you've got, going back to, I guess, the more UFO side of things, you've had Roswell over in America. I don't know if you've heard of Rendlesham Forest in the UK as well.
Oh, sure. Oh,
which
absolutely.
is a really big one with us. And the amount of people on the back of Rendlesham who've been silenced after trying to speak out about and this is from military personnel with quite high-ranking positions as well. And it's not really something that you'd normally see from the military, whether the UK, US, or anywhere else, that they would conduct experiments in the open. And in fact, they try and shut these things down quite often. And it'd be interesting to know whether OPUS, whether you've had any interactions with the government, the military, where they have maybe tried to stop you from doing what you do.
Well, that's a good question, because I think we have, for whatever reason, we have never had any problems with the military that we're aware of at all. We have handled the situation for them, so to speak. Instead of these people running to their Congress people or their political leaders screaming, about what's going on, they can come to us, and then we connect them and calm the situation down, if you will. So I think we're doing them a service in some kind of crazy way, that they've not decided to come after us in any way, shape, or form, and not messed with our website or anything like that. Last year, for instance, going back to the question about, how perhaps if we helped with the conversation about these kind of things, I did 42 podcasts last year.
Wow.
And that has helped us in many ways get the word out. I really appreciate what you do, Alex. This is a service that is necessary for people that are looking for some kind of help or some kind of confirmation about what's going on with them. It's all super, super important. And I think that's the next thing that we'll be dealing with, besides, okay, what are these objects? Who's in them? What's their agenda? Which are all legitimate questions. And so I think that we will be dealing with this at some point. But I think we're going to have to wait here in the United States until after our election in November.
Yeah, that's
because
brewing.
there's just too much focus on that at the moment, and then Congress is so tied up with so many other things that our particular issue here is not really getting the kind of focus it really needs. But hopefully it'll start revving up again soon. 2023 was one hell of a year of revelation. So if we can have another year like that'll be incredible.
Yeah. And in what way can you expand on that?
Well, I think the fact that, congressional hearing, first of all, which blew me away, was the fact that it was so bipartisan. We had Republicans and Democrats who basically fight each other tooth and nail, agreeing on the fact that we need to get to the bottom of this. We need to understand this. Do we have the technology? Do we have the bodies? Do we have the crashed vehicles? And what does that mean? Are we in danger in some way, shape, or form? Because that's the way it's being laid out, which I think is a smart way to do it, because the only way to get our Congress to move is that there has to be an imminent threat of some sort. And the fact that they've actually done what they've done, having these open congressional hearings and then subsequent more secret behind doors, closed doors type meetings, that there's a real push to get to the bottom of this. And so I'm hoping that those kind of things actually come about, where we do get to the right people. They've compartmentalized this phenomena so well that if you go to one person in the Pentagon, our Pentagon, or the DOD, Department of Defense, that person may not know the story, or may only know a small part of it. So who has the rest of the story? Well, somebody does, but so far, I don't think we've gotten to the right person with the right information to really, get to the bottom of it, because there are forces within our government that don't want this to come out. They just don't want it to come out. They've been basically trying to slow the process down as much as they can. And so you can only hope that the Congress people that did get together to try to, unravel this phenomena continue to do what they're doing and are able to get somewhere. But only time will tell.
Yeah. And I mean, it was really interesting to see Major David Grush come out with some of the things he did. And of course, you're going to have your naysayers, but it's not something we've ever really seen with somebody in that position actually coming forward and talking about it in front of Congress. And It would be really quite something to see other people step up, but it comes back to the whole government trying to silence these things because, of course, they don't really want the public to know. But it's interesting what you said about the danger element of it. And, are we in danger if this has come to light recently? And I think some of the things that Dave Grush mentioned was that, of course, this isn't just in the US. It's also Russia, and there's other countries where this phenomenon has occurred. And maybe countries like Russia could be working with some of these other alien intelligences using their technology. Maybe they could have a different agenda, and I wonder if that could maybe come into it as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's the understanding is that it's not us, and they claim it's not the Russians or the Chinese, and so what's left? They don't say it's extraterrestrial or what have you. The terminology interdimensional comes up a lot. That's what Grush also talked about. He said that terminology interdimensionals. Well, that it presents a really interesting conundrum, I think, in the sense that we are dealing with different dimensions, and of course the string theory talks about multiple different amounts of string theory, whether it's 10 degrees or 11 degrees or 13 different dimensions. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, that the tact of saying these things could be dangerous, it's impacting air travel, it's impacting our military, and so we need to understand what it is. And once we do, then we can deal with it better. Lou Elizondo talked about that lunch that I was able to have with him, with these other people, was the fact that they think they understand how these objects operate. And it's an interaction between the skin of the craft, which the skin of the craft has been known, supposedly made up of quite an exotic combination of elements. And it's an interaction of that in the power source, which he also said it wasn't element 115. He says, nah, he says it's a very small power source. So he knows a hell of a lot more, and he hasn't really come out with that anywhere that I'm aware of. So you're hearing it first here.
And I guess it's one of those as well. You probably expect that won't be talked about much because of the silencing and things as well. But it's interesting as well about the low power and these different elements, and something that you said earlier about your own experience and some of the other people's experiences did interest me, because you mentioned about the craft being silent, and that is something that seems to always come up with these experiences. There's never really any noise that you don't hear, it's not like in the movies where, you hear like these sci-fi sounds as it hovers above. It's just completely silent. And I always think that's quite an interesting thing as well, in terms of the technology they must be using.
Absolutely. Or you do hear occasionally sounds of whirring sound, and a humming. There's a humming sound that people have talked about also, but majority of the cases, it's pretty silent. And they've been able to, whatever means of technology that they're utilizing, to eliminate the need for sound.
Yeah, but it's just something that, I mean, even people that I've spoken to, and I remember this from when I was a teenager, because we moved to France for a few years, Pyrenees, and there was, of all places, there was an Irish pub in this French village that we were staying in while moving everything over. And there's a guy called Tom who ran the pub. And I mean, there was only me and maybe a couple of other people in there. And he was telling us a story quite similar to yours, in that he was on a beach and this craft craft. And again, it was, that usual kind of saucer craft spinning slowly, hovered up above him and his brother. So again, it's a shared experience. Him and his brother both experienced this when they were younger, and it hovered above them and they could see the water, because it was just on the beach where the tide's coming in, and they could see the water swirling around. But again, even the water was silent, which I found really interesting. And then it just shot off as though it had never been there. And they both swear to this day that they saw it. And they were the only ones on this kind of cove in the beach that they were at. And it's just interesting to me when people have these experiences and you have things like that is the same in every single story, the silent craft and oftentimes the description of the craft. But I think you did also mention earlier the shapes can vary as well. Sometimes you might see like a triangle as well.
Oh my goodness. There's a myriad number of shapes. I mean, there's bell shapes, there's diamond shapes, there's balls. There's been so many different shapes seen. And so what does that tell you? Are we dealing with many, many species that are coming here? Or is it one group over a different time period? Here we go again, talking about space and time and how that can be manipulated. But I mean, I've heard numbers as high as in the 200s of species that are actually visiting us. I can't say that is true or false. It could be. Certainly could be. Yeah. But the main ones that we hear time and time again are the Greys, the reptilians, the mantis type, the Nordics, and our military.
I think the Greys are probably the more renowned ones, aren't they? But the Nordics actually is one I'm not too familiar with. What are the Nordics like?
Well, I mean, they look very Scandinavian. That's the name Nordics.
Yeah.
They're typical blonde hair, good looking group of people. They're kind of an enigma. I don't hear a lot about them other than the fact that they do show up often in the presence of these other creatures. And so there's some kind of a connection. But the one thing that I've said about these Greys is there must be some kind of a universal store out there, like an iPhone store, but it's called a Grey store, because all these other entities seem to utilize the small Greys, and so there's got to be some kind of a reason for that. I think, of course, these are like biological, robotic in nature. I've had people bite them, hit them, one even tore an arm off, and they didn't react that much.
So they're very fragile.
They seem to be, and you really wonder. I think what it is that they utilize those because we are violent people, okay? And they don't want to get involved with us, so they send in the Greys, and they stand away. They don't usually interact on a direct basis. It's usually something else, someone else. Whether it's a Grey or a tall Grey or we we have a tendency to be pretty violent, and I think they just send in this robotic biological entity to do the dirty work.
The grunts.
Yep.
And with Opus as well, I know you've mentioned that you collaborate with other organizations to help with the support given. What do those other organizations look like?
Well, I mentioned it earlier, and it's listed on our website. The Spiritual Emergence Network, Our Back Paranormal Organization. We deal with the latest organization we're affiliated with is the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. Another one called UAP Med. When we get into a situation where we don't have the expertise in house, then we connect people with those other organizations so that they have the expertise.
Yeah, and they go to the right place.
We'll go to the right place, exactly.
Great. And just before, because I'd like to speak a little bit about your other work and your books, for example, but I just wondered if you have a particular story you'd like to share that might have given you some sleepless nights, something that, really shook you to the core.
Well, I think, I mentioned the one about the couple, the amateur pilots that had that experience, but there was another one where it was involved a park ranger and his girlfriend, and they were coming back from a dinner, and it was getting to be dusk, and they were driving by this field. And they noticed this rather large orange, reddish orb hovering over the field. And once they saw it, it was like they felt like they became more robotic in nature. And where they were when this occurred was only like 5 minutes from where he was stationed. Okay. He was in a trailer. This was at a beach, Sunset Beach in Northern California. And the last thing they remember after looking at it and then turning their heads to look back down the road where they were going, they didn't get to their trailer for like 2.5 hours. And they didn't recall anything with that time, what had happened during that 2.5 hours to get from where they were to the trailer.
So another instance of lost time.
The lost time, exactly. Well, that night, though, things got really interesting. Fast forward to the morning, they noticed some blood on the sheets, and they couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And then they finally noticed that it was from her. There was a wound on her leg, and they couldn't figure out what had happened. Well, subsequently, we found out, that night, these entities, basically these grays, abducted him, took him right through the wall of the vehicle. And she saw this all happening, and she couldn't do anything. She was like paralyzed. And when he was returned, evidently, she was able to see that as well. And then it was like she fell back to sleep, like nothing happened. And that's something that happens often, where people start seeing things and then they say, okay, I'm going to go to bed. Like nothing happened. And so that next morning, they started to remember things, and it really shook him up to the point where he finally disappeared. He took off, and she was never able to find him, where he went or what happened to him. It shook him up so much. And so she eventually came into the support group that we had and told this story. Oh, also they had a German Shepherd dog, and the dog was knocked out during the whole time this was going on, which also is kind of typical of things like that happening, where they don't want the interference of an animal or anything like that. They knock it out in some way, shape, or form. But it's fascinating, to hear these stories, and then you get corroboration in a way by physical things being like the blood showing up. We don't know exactly what they did to her, but obviously they did do something to her while she was out, and didn't have an implant that we ever discovered or anything like that. So. Yeah, there's
Creepy,
so many
it?
cases like that. Oh, yeah. It is. Yeah. It's you're being attacked, basically. Yeah. Something you don't want to have happen, and then it happens, and then you don't want it to happen again. And what do you do? What do you do with that? A lot of people come to us and say, I don't want this to happen again. How do I stop it? One of the things that comes up time and time again is the fact that when people invoke the name of Jesus Christ, these entities seem to understand that and back off.
So there is maybe some kind of religious connotation to it.
Yep. Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah. It is.
And that's not just with sort of the demonic presences. Is that, are we saying this is also with kind of the alien entities as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's not something I've ever heard before.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a book out by a woman by the name of Ann Druffel. Ann, unfortunately passed away a number of years ago. But her book is How to Defend Yourself Against Alien Abduction. And she put together, I think, is 8 or 9 different ways that people have utilized in preventing the occurrence of these types of things. And what I've found working with people is that a lot of times people say that they want the phenomena to stop, but they still have a curiosity. They have a real curiosity as to what's going on and to want to understand it better. And that leaves the door open for these entities to come in again. The other thing is people have used as being very forceful and saying, stop. I don't want this to be happening anymore. You must stop this. You're impinging on my freedom and I don't like it. So you need to stop it. And some people have utilized that method and stopped the occurrence. But that book is a good book. That's still being published. So you can get that on Amazon along with everything else in the world. And that's where you can get my book, too.
Yeah, which we'll come on to. Just before we do, I did just want to ask, so for anybody listening to this interview that may be able to relate to some of the experiences we've mentioned and they're maybe not sure what to do, what would you say to anyone who's had a paranormal experience? What advice would you give?
Well, we would love to give them assistance. All you have to do is go to opusnetwork.org, opusnetwork.org. And there's a support button on there in a number of places. And we just ask you very few questions. One being, do you want to be put into the support group? Number two, do you want an EST member to contact you? And then once we go through that process, if you're looking for a hypnotherapist or a mental health practitioner, a lot of these people develop PTSD. So there are practitioners, mental health practitioners that are very familiar with PTSD and how to handle those kind of post-traumatic stress disorders, and trying to get people in a better place so that they can live their lives the way they need to.
Thank you very much. And coming on to your book, what's it called and what's it about?
Yeah, The Unknown Other and the Existential Proposition of Alien Contact. And what I've done is to give some background on OPUS and what we do, of course. But I've also gone into the physical aspects of contact, the psychological aspects of contact. I talk a little bit about the congressional publication that came out back in 2021. I talk about the UFO encounters, Tic Tac encounters with our military, the Omega-3 study in its entirety, I should say, is in the book as well. It's about 28 pages of statistical data. But one of the things we found, and I didn't mention it before, was that there was a difference between the people that had contact and the people that were our control group in their temporal lobe activity. There was definite, distinct difference there. And so that to me is a very interesting factor. And they're finding out, the gentleman from Stanford University, Gary Nolan, did some studies on experiencers, and they found out that there was a difference in the area of the caudate and putamen. There was a lot more connections in that part of the brain with these people that had psychic abilities, telepathic capabilities. And then they found that it was generational, that usually if they had it, then their parents had it, or their grandparents had it. And so this goes again back to the theory about our genes, our DNA has been messed with, and that they're following people like this.
And that kind of explains the why us theory, doesn't it? Or the why us question that comes up.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So it is fascinating. There's so many aspects of it. As they say, once you go down this rabbit hole, there's many avenues that you can go, and it's just one question after the next. Because that's the problem with all of this, is the fact that we don't have definitive answers.
No, and you end up down like kind of rabbit hole, don't you? I suppose, and every question you think you might be able to answer leads to more questions, which I guess is one of the biggest challenges you might face at Opus.
Right. Exactly. So one of the things too that I always like to mention is the fact that we're always looking for more therapists, and we do have some people in the UK that we can point people to, but we're always looking for more mental health practitioners or certified hypnotherapists. We also are on Facebook. We have a page and a group there. We also, I mentioned earlier that we have a YouTube channel. Go to Opus separate word network, and you can see some of the interviews that I've done with people. Let's see what else. We're on Instagram. But bottom line on all of this is the fact that if you're looking for help, we'd be happy to try to help you. And if you know of somebody that's looking for help, please have them get a hold of us through our website, which is the easiest way to start the process. And after you contact us within 72 hours, we'll have you set up on the website, the support group site. And if you're looking for an EST member to chat with, we can get you set up there as well.
Great. And you mentioned that can be anybody worldwide.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant.
This is an international phenomenon. It's going on all over the place. And it's interesting to see where this is going to end up. I mean, in my lifetime, I did not think we would be this far along. But boy, this last year, it's been amazing.
It's raised a lot more questions, hasn't it? And in fact, maybe even given a few answers or more things to speculate on than we maybe had before. And one thing certain, I think it has opened more minds. Potentially. I have, even just on a general work day or when speaking to friends, I think it's more common these days for people to actually talk about it as a serious topic rather than it being just the ramblings of a madman. And it's being taken more seriously, which I think is a really good step in the right direction.
Oh, absolutely. The stigma that's associated with this is, that's one of the reasons why they changed it from UFO to UAP. because UFO carries a lot of baggage, the laugh curtain, people thinking you're crazy and all of that kind of stuff. Whereas UAP, wait a minute, no, this is a little more scientific. Unidentified anomalous phenomena. they don't even put an aerial in there anymore, because it encompasses a lot of different things.
It does. And of course, you even see, I think you mentioned earlier about Navy pilot and, Navy members, surface fleet members. They do track things that are unexplained. And I think that there will be a lot more people out there that, of course, won't ever talk about their experience, that we have no idea. We don't know that they exist, those experiences. But it is a really fascinating
People are
thing.
going through this kind of thing every day. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't know where to turn. As I mentioned earlier, too, that they can't talk to their family members, their fellow workers, or their clergy. They're just not open to it. But it's getting better. It is getting better. There's no question about that. And it has a lot to do with people like yourself that have these kind of podcasts. It's incredible. The two biggest things on the internet, right? Number one, of course, is pornography. Number two is UFO. The whole topic. I mean, number two in the world is UFO type topics. So people are starting to listen more. We're starting now to get more credible people involved with the topic, scientists. Gary Nolan has started his SOL Foundation, SOL Foundation, where he's trying to bring in more scientists to seriously look at the phenomena. There's more organizations popping up all the time looking at this. And so one of these days, hopefully we'll get the President of the United States to stand up behind his podium and say, ladies and gentlemen, we are not alone.
And this is what we'd like, isn't it? The truth from above.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like you do, incredibly important work, and it's something that I certainly didn't know about until I found you online. And I guess it's not something that pops up every day at an organization that helps people with these experiences that are very difficult to prove a lot of the time. But it's really important that there is a support network out there for people. So it sounds like you do brilliant work, and it sounds like you've had some great success over the years. So of course, I wish you further success in years to come. And thank you so much for joining the show.
Well, Alex, thank you so much. I really appreciate being with you, and I look forward to doing it again sometime.
What a great episode, and thank you for listening. If you would like to have a chance at appearing on a future episode, and you've got a scary story to tell, whether it's UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, or something else you can't explain, please get in touch at info@angryfoxmedia.com. Stay safe out there.